Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Jason is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Welcome, Rick.
Good morning, Vincent. I just sent you part 1 and part 2 of what I believe are important things to talk about this morning. Part 1 is 3 diary entries that I did on the 15th, the 16th, and the 17th. And I'd like you to just look at those as where we start, and then part 2 is a direction in terms of what I think might be a useful way to spend your day.
Okay.
And
while I'm bringing that up.
Right there. Number 2 is going on.
Yeah.
Mostly it's about the university that you and I are going to start.
Okay.
I think that what's going on right now is a bunch of hogwash. I have decided to go back to school and understand gene splicing, which I did, and how one makes a virus. And there isn't anything that I can't understand. And so I went back and I started looking at exactly what is and is not going on. We, the American public, in fact, the world public, is being played. I have high-end world authorities to support my belief system. It doesn't mean I'm right, but I'm gonna say something. If you're hanging on a wall by one hand and you're losing your grip and all of a sudden you fall and die, if you tested positive for coronavirus when you hit the ground, that's a death caused by the virus. That's item 1. That means that everybody is misdirected with data and the way they're choosing to show it. This virus is no different or no more of a killer than any other flu or cold that we might have in any given year. Page 1. Page 2. Why are they putting our children out to school when the children are not affected? In Italy, where they say they have all these deaths, you know why they have more deaths in Italy? Because the hospitals are turning away 80-year-old people that need to go to the hospital because they're sick for some reason. It has nothing to do with the flu. They're turning away age discrimination. Now, this is to support their right for declaring a state of emergency and War Act of World War II. And watch what happens next. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm in full revolt. That's my statement. And I've given you data to support it. And what we have now is a window of opportunity. This is going to cause a world change in everything. And that's okay. It needed changing. But this is not going to go, knock on wood, the way they think it's going to go. I'm hoping it goes the way I would like to see things go, where we begin to have a change on things. I remember when Gore first approached me to be on his cabinet because of Tony Van Zandt. You may not know this, but at one time during Spotted Owl, when Clinton went to Portland to talk about Spotted Owl, Gore spent 3 days with his 6 Secret Service agents at my home trying to convince me I should go into politics as a Secretary of Agriculture. I turned him down on the 3rd day when he told me that we don't need to focus on agriculture. We should let third world countries do that, and our attention should be focused more on high-tech physics. And I looked at him and I asked him what planet he was born on. Right now, most all of you, including me, only eat 3% of the food we've actually produced locally. I know there are more people out there that do the farmers market, but basically most cities are only eating 3% of the food that's produced right there. And I am reminded of Gurdjieff and other kinds of philosophers that said you should eat your environment, that 40%, your goal this year should be to eat 40% of the food you've produced locally. Doesn't mean your neighbor, your farmer's market, not Safeway, not Albertsons, not the produce from those areas, but produce that comes directly from Chattanooga or from Springfield, Missouri, or wherever. You should be eating local. And if you can do that, like you have 3 days of water on hand with a replacement plan, yeah, this virus means nothing. Everybody's going to get the cold sometime this year. This particular virus is particularly nasty for being communicable. It means it lasts a little longer before it dies. But the page I put together on 3/17/20, read those, Vincent. There are simple ways to determine whether or not you have the virus or not. One of which is just holding your breath for 10 seconds. When you wake up in the morning, if you hold your breath for 10 seconds and blow it out, if you don't cough, you don't have that virus. You might have a cold or a flu, but not this one. And that's a simple test to do. If you have it, all you have to do, like Tom Hanks, his wife, you just simply wait it through like you would any other cold or flu, and you're just fine. Aging, old people like me, I'm staying good health. There's no way I'm probably even going to be the 40% that doesn't get it. Yes, that's right. 60% of you will most likely, at some point, get this virus. So what? If you're in good health, the virus is whacked out very, very easily. And there is a large recovery thing. And where people are dying is from the panic. I've said there will be literally 100 times the people will die from the panic than from the flu itself. So if there's 3,000 people that die, there will be 30,000 that because of the fear of it. And it's done with intent. And Italy has started age discrimination. And of course those older people are going to die if they need to go into a hospital because they have pneumonia. That's what most people die of. Not the disease that they have, but their response to not being able to cope with the disease, and pneumonia sets in. It's time all of us educate ourselves and take steps to become a little more sovereign.
So, Rick, are you saying that dying of the panic is because of the internal additional stress that causes the body system?
They don't know what to think. I watch people going into Walmart hoarding toilet paper, and if you look right below the barcode, where did it come from? Made from China. These people are nuts. They're nuts. They're lemmings. And I'm going to guess some of them were paid to make it look like there was a raid. The whole thing's orchestrated. It's not real. It's not real. Which scientist would you like me to quote from? Germany or from how about China? China overreacted, and the world saw a window of opportunity. Let's go for it.
Rick, are you suggesting that we don't need to prepare, that we don't need to brace for the coming additional shooting?
Okay, when HIV came out, which, by the way, was way more serious than this one, by 2 orders of magnitude. When HIV came out, it simply meant you couldn't have sex up the rear. Listen, this whole thing is nuts. Of course you don't want to go into large crowds of people right now, because that's how you get the flu. I remember my parents taking me to get sick with mumps and measles and chickenpox, because I could easily ward it off. Those were real killers. And they didn't give me immunity shots. They exposed me. That's how they do immunity. It's your body that fights it off, not an inoculation. Medicine is broken. It's not right any more than dentistry is. The those two industries, dentistry and medicine, basically should be, they're from the Dark Ages. To use radiation as a way to cure cancer? I had a little girl die in my arms of leukemia because of that crap. I've been there and done that, and now I'm 76 years old, and most of you respect me for being at least semi-informed. I'm semi-informed, and I decided to go out of my way and get more informed, and the more informed I got on this virus, the more depressed I got at the lemming things. Let's see the one for March 16th, my birthday. That's the second of 3 documents I sent you. The one there runs it down in terms of what happens next and what happens as a result of this virus. It isn't about people dying. Let's say we go to paperless money because we don't want to. Can you imagine being a banker right now, moving currency across a counter with anyone that walks into the bank? You know, who knows what drug it was in to snort cocaine, whatever. Then you move to the second part, like who actually benefits. Well, let's say this trial was postponed in Israel because he was going to go to trial for being corrupt, and that thing got put off. Let's say, the list goes down and down in terms of what actually is going to happen as a result of the panic of this thing, and none of it is right. So, yes, the universe has changed, and yes, it's never going to be the same again. Just like it was during the 50s and the 60s and the 70s with music, war, or whatever. You know, I remember the music band War. What's it good for? Well, it's big business. What do you think's happening? Who's benefiting from this whole thing? That's a good question to ask. This is wrong. To close down borders between California and Oregon, that's the next thing that just happened. And all the kids...
Rick, we're going into a break. We'll be right back. And we've been talking about the corona panic. Rick, in San Francisco, they're in their second day of lockdown. The city is locked down. And the order in San Francisco bans any activities that are not essential. No drinking at bars, no haircuts by barbers, no dinner parties. Restaurants can only operate for takeout delivery. Outdoor exercise is allowed, but gyms are closed. I assume the bathhouses are closed as well. But, Rick, are you saying that that's not necessary, or are you saying that is necessary? I'm confused.
Well, okay, common sense. It's like going to grade school to pick up your daughter. Grade school is a breeding ground for diseases. That's one of the things public school offers, is the child builds up natural immunities way better in a public school than they might at homeschooling. So there are pluses and minuses on why you do what you do. And if you go to a large restaurant and they're not doing salmonella, I mean, just as easily that person handling your food and everybody else's food, and or the busboy that cleans up after somebody and then cleans up another table, and that isn't washed quite correctly, and it gets back out on the table to someone else, what do you think's going to happen? The normal contamination. That's why you keep your body healthy, because it is the physical body that wards off all this crap. And it's no different than today. Do I want to go to a restaurant and eat? Yeah. Do I choose certain places over others? Yes. How about a salad bar where everybody gets to touch it and decides, no, I don't want that, and they put it back? Yeah, it's time you think about sanitation a little differently than you just presumed. No tongue when you hug. How about the Vulcan mind grip? The live long and crispy. You don't shake hands. You hold your hand up. How about coming over to your house and letting people you don't know inside your house? How's that work? Where have they been? Out in the outhouse? Of course, you need to rethink a lot of values that you have assumed or presumed in terms of handling cleanliness and health. But am I afraid? Absolutely not. What I'm afraid of is what happens to all those people that are marginally existing and now can't go to work for 2 weeks. And what happens to those people and their incomes, and how that is going to affect their health. And we'll blame it on the coronavirus.
Okay, well, Rick, it seems the choice is clear. If the government takes a position and says, all right, we're going to lock down, we're going to quarantine, we're going to limit travel and so forth, we're going to limit the number of people who can go to a restaurant, we're going to limit gatherings in social circumstances and settings, that will crash the economy. Or the government can say, no, boys and girls, everything's good, don't worry about it, and try to keep the economy afloat. So it seems like there's a choice. And it's not, what they're doing right now is not working because it's crashing the economy. The reports that I'm reading are right now.
It's already crashed. Right now, even if everything went right back to normal, none of you, all of us, have suffered already in terms of the next 4 months of what happens next. Just your food choices in the stores.
Yeah, that's right. Well, right now, if you wanted to buy some things online, and I looked last night, in the middle of the night I got up, and I looked for Hearst ham beans, and it's a soup mix. It's a bag of beans with maybe some Cajun spices. Out of stock on, this is Walmart.com. Out of stock. Lipton onion soup mix in the box. Those 2 packets in a box. Out of stock. Campbell's split pea soup in cans. Out of stock. Goya 16 bean soup mix.
Well, let's get into more important things like your prescriptions at Walgreens and Walmart.
Well, these are important too. I mean, you gotta have enough food to. You gotta have food too. What I'm saying is there are shortages that are here right now. All right, we'll be right back with Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us. Rick, you mentioned the closing of the border between Oregon and California. Can you address that, please?
Would I do what?
Could you tell us more about that?
They're going to close the borders like they do for fruit fly and other kinds of things. That's going to happen today. They're going to have, in other words, you can't enter the state of California without first being inspected.
Yeah, I remember that back in 1980 when we were in California.
Do that now. We have border checks all the time going into California for the fruit fly and med fly. From the tropical fruits that they grow in California, they have an ag check to go into the state of California. They're going to do that, only this one's going to be ramped up and run by people wearing masks hazmat suits. That's crazy. What do you think that's going to do to an average family of people that don't do anything but watch Mickey Mouse?
I remember back in 1980 in California, there was the MedFly, which stood for Mediterranean Fruit Fly epidemic, allegedly, and there were airplanes spraying malathion from above, and they'd say, "Look, y'all, if you park your car out in the open and we spray, you're gonna have the paint peeling off your car in little specks as the insecticide eats the paint."
The whole thing is going to cause hardships on levels that are unacceptable. And when they come to my door for my weapon because of the flu epidemic, how did Yoda put it? My gun you may have. After I give you my bullets, I will. This is BS. It's total BS, and they're going to try to play it out. Trump just took the World War II War Act, and now to have complete say over corporations and what they can and can't do, because they're going to pretend like we're in a moment of war. Now, you tell me how that plays.
I can tell you right this moment that gasoline is available at multiple outlets in Springfield, Missouri at $1.72 for regular. I can also tell you that the price of gasoline at the New York Harbor, the wholesale price. Now get ready for this, class. I mentioned that you could buy gasoline in wholesale quantities at the New York Harbor at about $1, maybe a week ago. The current price of gasoline is 57 cents a gallon at the New York Harbor. 57 cents. The price of low sulfur diesel on the Gulf Coast right now is 93 cents a gallon. You know, the stuff that's selling for $3 or so a gallon. Yeah.
Why did people go hoarding toilet paper of all things? What is that about?
Well, because some people live in apartments. Some people live in high-density housing. Some people live in houses that have, an eighth of an acre or a quarter of an acre or half an acre, and they want to make sure that they can wipe. I mean, it's as simple as that.
They're already in the supermarket store with everybody else buying the hoarding things. Before it's too late, end quote.
Well, Rick, our family buys toilet paper, let's say, every 5 or 10 years when it's on sale. That's what we do.
It's crazy, the behavior of people in panic.
Oh, absolutely.
That is what is going to cause the trouble. When you start to rationally question what's going on and why, there are no answers to respond in terms of current behavior. 2 days ago, I saw a man driving the wrong way down a one-way street because he did not want to do a big circle around. He was in a hurry, and he wanted to go 2 blocks down to cut over. So he went down a wrong-way street. People's behavior during these kinds of crises go beyond rationale to the point where people become irrational. And when we talked about it, the way people are driving last month, watch what happens today. And that is what the problem of panic is about. Fear is the first enemy of man, and this virus is no different than any other common cold. It just lasts longer before it kills itself out. And once it's in your body drills it. It's only if you don't have enough water that it will establish. So hydration is another part of time for life changes and the way you look at what you do and why. And if you want to live in a high-rise where you don't know where everybody came from, they could have just as easily come from China. Who knows? I can tell you that none of the statistics that are being given are real. They have manipulated the data, and I think it's time that we start calling out Fox News and the rest of it. Fox News used to be a place where I would go for the alternative media over CBS. I used to like Dan Rather, and before that was Walter Cronkite. And once Dan Rather got on, my credibility for CBS dropped to the point where I started going and picking up a second input from Fox News. And then I changed from Fox News to PBS. But none of it is real. And the whole thing is about media, and while there are honest reporters out there, you'll notice that many of them that are calling things out, whether it's sex abuse, whatever, they're all being fired off of major networks. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I wonder how many of them. I wonder how many of those people worship at the same house of worship.
It goes downhill from there, and handshaking, and all the rest of what we do as a social human society. It's time to rethink what we do and why. And I would start with your food, just like last year when Matt Stein was still alive, we were talking about water. Once you have your water, now you need to do your food. And your food should be, the goal you should have is 40% by the end of summer, you are eating 40% of the food that you consume. You should be doing it yourself and or getting it from a local neighbor, like a food court, a farmer's market. Somebody growing it locally.
Yeah. Well, Rick, you mentioned water. In Missouri, right at this moment, there's massive flooding. We just had a torrential rain on top of day after day after day after day of rain and no sun. So the sun didn't evaporate the water from the ground. It is percolated down. And I know for a fact that we have a perimeter drain system around our house, 10 feet down, 10 feet below grade. And what it does is it's perforated 4-inch pipe, and it has holes in it. And as the water goes down below grade, this pipe will pick up the moisture, droplets, water, etc., and send it to a lower elevation. That water is running at a stream almost like a faucet. That's how much water is coming through this pipe. Now, normally there's none for months and months and months and none. We have so much rain, it doesn't even have to rain to have water coming from underground. And I'm only talking 10 feet down. Here's where I'm going with this. The ground is super saturated. This is like the early days of Noah's flood. If it continues like this, trees will fall over because the root balls will be in mud rather than soil, and the slightest wind will blow them over. We've seen this happen before. There's another problem with this. Okay, so these big trees that are, let's say 100 years old can fall across the road, land on houses, take down roofs of houses, smash cars, and block the roadways. And, 4 guys with pickup trucks are not going to be able to move these trees. They're that big. That's one thing. Next thing is the preferred method of sewage disposal in Missouri, if you have land, is a lagoon. And a lagoon is nothing more than a hole, a depression, cut out of the soil so that it becomes like a pond, but a pond that doesn't fill up the way a normal pond would from runoff. So a lagoon is an area that's higher up than that. It fills up with liquid waste and solid waste from flushing the toilets and the sinks and the washing machine and so forth. All right. We had so much rain this morning that the roads are flooded. We are unable to get out, even with a 4-wheel drive pickup truck that's 3/4 ton raised, another 6 inches, from the factory. It's tall pickup truck, can't get out. We're stuck here because of the rushing water across the road. Culverts are washed out. Now, the reason I mentioned the lagoons is they've overflowed. We don't have one, but a lot of people do. So the lagoons that have overflowed have cross-connected with the streams, and raw sewage is running downhill. Now, what does that do? Well, there are people who live downhill, and that's going to cross-connect with their wells. The wells most of the wells use the same aquifer. So now we're going to have fecal matter in the well water. The alarm that I'm ringing is that this has nothing to do with the coronavirus. This is just another piece of how difficult it's becoming to just survive. So yesterday's well was probably okay, and last week's was okay, and last year's was okay, but today it's now suspect. Rick, do you follow my logic?
Yes, the whole thing is going to require every one of us rethinking the way we do what we do and our lifestyle. And with that comes an opportunity to make things better.
So I just did a quick search for gasoline in Nixa, Missouri, Nixa, $1.66 per gallon, regular, unleaded. $1.67 at Casey's. Murphy USA, which is where the Chinese factory outlets sell gasoline, $1.67. Rick, what is gasoline in your neck?
179 in Oregon.
Huh?
Yeah, we have refineries in California and Washington State, and so the gas is brought in from either of those two states usually.
Okay, but these prices are pretty low, aren't they?
Yeah. Used to be up to 240, 270. Now down to 179, 172.
So, Rick, what I'm finding out is, regardless of whether the coronavirus is a mild case, or an extreme case that wipes people's lives out, the supply chain is broken. Do you agree with that?
The supply chain is broken. That's going to affect health on its own, and it goes downhill from there because there are now kids that are not going to school. They'll go back to school just before summer break, and they've lost another month minimum of education.
Well, no, they just missed a month or more of school, not of education, necessarily. So, Rick, we're talking about children's education, and I'd like to say it this way. Here's how I look at it. I would never let the government training camp get in the way of our children's education. Any comments?
Well, I'm grateful that you are reconsidering being Dumbledore for our new metaphysical school online, because all these kids right now, what are they doing for their education? They're talking about not even starting school back up until the end of May and end of April. And let me tell you, that's 1 month and then summer vacation. And they have lost another full month of education in our children with public schools. And this is an abomination. It's not right.
I don't know if they're really being educated, Rick. They're going
not.
Through motions.
What happened to woodshop? What happened to mechanical drawing? What happened to home economics? What happened to, the list goes on of things that you and I took when we were in high school. They don't even offer those anymore.
Back in 1990.
And as you so accurately pointed out, Diamond and Home Depot have to put out new special videos on how to use screwdrivers. This is crazy.
Well, it's more than that. It's how to use a level. It's how to use a level. It's how to use a tape measure. I mentioned on this broadcast over the years, just a couple times, that I have a friend who had a business that would fabricate things out of metal, and it was just down the road from a high school. And he was a customer of ours, and I built his computer networks that he ran his business on. So we had lathes and presses and all kinds of machinery to fabricate metal. And when the high school students would show up and they'd say, "Hey, I'd like to have a job," he would take out of his shirt pocket a stainless steel ruler, small one, about 6 inches long, and he would ask them to show show him on that ruler a specific measurement. And they couldn't do it. Now, he's right down the road from the high school. I'm talking maybe a mile, maybe a little more, but not much more. And they were unable to read a ruler. This is in the 1990s. I mean, we've lost a lot of ground since then. But you're absolutely right in terms of home economics. I presented the superintendent of schools. I was just a teacher, and I rewrote the curriculum at a high level for our county's high school. And I presented it to him, and I said that what we needed to do was teach things like principles of insurance, principles of business, principles of banking, a lot of principles and ethics that we should include in the curriculum. And then we should take other things out, like, nice fuzzy stuff that you can't really do much with. And I was told it's not going to happen. And so why isn't that going to happen? Well, if you really look at what is happening with schools, schools are taking money under contract with the federal government. The government says, we will give you this money, but you will do these things. And that includes reporting. So schools have enormous reporting requirements based on what is taught and what is regurgitated of what is taught. And so those reports about who, what, when, where, why, and how are filled out by the teachers in lieu of preparing for the next day's classes. So teachers are filling out forms and reports for the feds instead of preparing to teach the classes for the students. So education is failing, but we have more information or more data, and we have more money. So schools now have more money per student and are doing a worse job of education. And so what do these schools say? The problem with education. Yep, you're right. We need more money. No, they don't need more money. What they need is books. They need paper, pencils, and teachers. Qualified teachers who are able to teach the subject without reading it the night before and regurgitating it in front of the classroom for the students to hear and then regurgitate for the test. That's what has happened to education. Do you agree or disagree, Rick?
The whole thing is done with intent. And the creepy part is to realize that the guy that supposedly did Microsoft, Bill Gates, owns the patent to this specific virus, and he owns the Wuhan facility that it got leaked in, doing the studies on it. Now, how does that work?
I wonder if he goes to the same church as these other people who do these evil things. I wonder what church that is. Maybe it's not even a church. So, Rick, I'm concerned about the water. I'm concerned about the supply chain. And right now, almost 20% of households in the United States have lost work due to the pandemic. Now, some people have said, no, it's not a pandemic.
Yeah, lost income.
Yeah, but it is a pandemic. And we've defined what a pandemic is. Class, Rick and I will be right back after top of the hour news and commercial announcements. This is USA Prepares. Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Rick, we know a gal, a middle-aged gal, whose husband is an over-the-road trucker. He drives one of those big rigs, 18-wheelers. And the report that we got in the last few days from her is that her husband said that the 18-wheelers have now received an approval from the federal government to increase the weight of the over-the-road trucks so they can fill them with more goods. And the weight is up from the standard limit that was imposed, so they can ride heavier. Now, that means they're going to take longer to slow down, class. That means that they're going to be harder to control. But that's what the government wants to do. Why? Because there's a shortage of truckers right now. And truckers are, not feeling well as well as other people are not feeling well. But it's worse than that. What's happening is as restaurants are being forced to close and as restaurants are being forced to limit the number of occupants or patrons, there are fewer and fewer places for these truck drivers to stop and eat. Now, a lot of them bring meals with them, but what's happening is the restaurants don't want the truckers there because the truckers have been places that the restaurant employees don't know about, where they come from, who they touch, those kinds of things. Are they bringing the coronavirus with them? So what the truckers are doing now is they're going to supermarkets, and they're buying things to eat, and they're making their own meals for consumption in the trucks. However, the supermarket people don't want the truckers in the supermarkets either, because they don't know where the truckers have been. So what's happening is people are saying, bring us our toilet paper, but don't come into our restaurants and supermarkets. That's happening right now. Any comments, Rick?
So there it is. They're messing across the board, and it has nothing to do with the virus itself. It's an excuse to impose martial law.
Well, we can feel martial law coming. But Rick,
here it is. Right now, right here, right now.
Rick, are you saying that this virus is not something to be concerned about?
No, it's not. What's to be concerned about are the people's response to it. That is something to be concerned about.
Doctors
and how individuals in a position of power will use that fear to their own ends for control.
Okay, Fiat Chrysler, General Motors, and Ford have all shut down for a few weeks.
What do you think that's going to do to individuals and their stress of no incomes?
It's going to destroy.
Make them sick. Are we going to blame that on the virus so the whole thing spirals?
Well, it will spiral. It will spiral because, as we mentioned earlier in the broadcast, hour number one, it's pick one. Save the economy or save the people. That's what it is. And what we're doing
the exact opposite. Right. And really, agriculture is what made this country great, not guns and Bible. Mm-hmm. Guns and Bible are what they, most Midwest would say, my Bible and my pistol are what saved me. And really, it was American agriculture. And as soon as each of us begin our own victory garden and herbal pharmacy is when this country will begin to regain its original strength. And that's that. Simple as that.
Rick, there are drive-through or drive-up testing areas popping up across the country. And what hospitals are doing when they get calls, this is what's beginning right now. When hospitals get calls like Uncle Joe's sick, and he's not feeling well, and okay, what are the symptoms? Well, if the patient presents the symptoms of this dry cough, fever, and labored breath, maybe hypoxic, turning blue, they'll say, the hospital will tell them to go to this drive-up clinic where they will be swabbed and tested. And actually, it's not a clinic. It's more like a drive-through fast food joint. And they will get the test. It will be swabbed. It will be sent in. 3 or 4 days later, it will come back, and then we'll know whether the patient has the coronavirus or not. Now, if the patient has it, I guess the only treatment is really hydration and a ventilator if the patient can't breathe at all. But there is no injection. There's no serum. There's no antidote.
It doesn't work like that. That's the whole thing that people misunderstand. It is about immunization. It's about staying healthy in the first place. And if you're healthy, this virus means nothing any more than you getting a common cold or a common virus flu. And how many people do you know have the flu right now? And how many people had the flu last year that you know about before coronavirus? And you'll find that the ratios are the same. They're not increased. They've not decreased. They're the same. So what makes this one a bigger deal? The media. And as far as I'm concerned, I've had enough of media. I don't even know anymore who's trying to do the right thing. Really, I really don't. And someone like myself trying to report to you, I make mistakes. And what I try not to do is make the same mistake and vet my instinct and my knowledge base. And really, we have no problem with the flu. Even if you got this virus, you're going to kick it off simply. Just like only what, literally, if you look at the figures correctly, 1% have died from this flu, not 30%. Now, if it's 1%, that's the same as it is in a period when nobody is getting ill and you still have deaths from flu and pneumonia. So what makes this different? The media and the public's response to the media and the fear of what might happen. And really, this is the most important thing I'm going to say today. Man, woman, has a responsibility for the thoughts they choose to entertain. You are bringing it on yourself, and you are being coerced like hypnosis. They're fooling you. And the bottom line is, if you choose not to be fooled, watch what happens next in your health. The mind's eye is more important than any other thing going on right now. What you think is going on. That's what's creating the apocalypse. And once you get that, I'm living very good. I just don't allow people into my home anymore that I don't know where they were from. I'll go outside and meet them outside of my home. I don't let them come inside. I should have been doing that 10 years ago.
It's a great feeling, isn't it? Isn't it a great feeling when people just don't show up and interrupt your the things that you want to do?
I had a friend that was flying in to Medford to do some business, and then she wanted to say, is it possible I come over for a couple of days and spend the time with you? And we would love to have her do that, except the fear now of her being stuck here because she can't go back to California under quarantine.
Okay, so I've heard two stories of people I know. These are people I know, and I've heard from a third person that, and these people don't know each other. So one went to Mexico for a business purpose, and the other went to Mexico for a business purpose, and it's difficult for them to get back. You know, one went to go buy a collection of art. You know, it was available, and he hopped on a plane, went there, and he can't get back. Another one went to Mexico for a different reason, can't get back. And they weren't thinking that, geez, you know, before I go, am I going to be able to get back? I know another guy that went on an airplane. He went, halfway across the country, actually 2/3 of the way across the country, and I don't know if he's going to get back. So, you know, travel is kind of a risky thing right now. And I believe, and I may be wrong about this.
It's not because of the virus, it's because of the fear of the virus.
Well, you know, there was a series called The Walking Dead, which I assigned as homework. And after The Walking Dead was released, that series, there was the next series called Fear the Walking Dead. Interesting that you bring that up. Well, here's the impact that as I see it. So the traditional funeral, a person dies, and this would be like last year maybe, and for 100 years before that, someone dies, there'd be a funeral, and people would go and they would mourn. and he'd try to console the family member that was closest to that person who died. Well, that's kind of not working so well now. So we're not having funerals where there are large gatherings of people to mourn. We're not having graduations where a whole bunch of people watch the graduates, the newly graduated, walk across the stage. Weddings. I talked with one of our instructor's spouses, and I heard that one of the family was going to be in the wedding party, like the best man. And he can't go because he doesn't know if he can get back, or he doesn't know if it's safe to go. So now that wedding is being postponed. People are not going to church because the fear of large gatherings. People are not going to concerts. People are not going to sports arenas. People are not going to venues where they are spectators, like car races and basketball games and baseball games, etc. So gatherings that used to be popular and common are now not happening the way they used to. So there is a tremendous reaction. Now, it's not just in Oregon or New York City. This is happening worldwide. So, Rick, how do you describe how, if this thing is really not real and it's really not dangerous, that governments and corporations across the globe are reacting with, we're going to shut down? Google shut down its offices. Apple has shut down all of its stores. Okay, supermarkets are restricting who goes in when. Sam's Club is doing the same thing. Stores and online outlets are out of lots of products. How do you describe why that is? Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us. So, Rick, how is it possible that this was orchestrated worldwide such that just about every government on the planet is involved with shutting down businesses, telling businesses that they cannot operate, closing restaurants, closing borders? This is collapsing our social fabric. And I'm not saying our social fabric was all that great, but it's collapsing. And in one small speck of an example is the National Association of Broadcasters Convention, which I did attend many, many years ago in Las Vegas. The attendance was over 100,000, and that has been canceled. That was scheduled to be next month. So this is a big deal canceling that because there's a lot of money lost just in doing that. So Las Vegas is shut down. Even Front Sight, the gun training camp, has been shut down for now because they are in Nevada, and Nevada has told businesses that they will not have large gatherings. So how is it that all these countries have and seem to agree to do this if it's not real? Or is it real?
It's fear of need for change in the way we do things, the way we build our automobiles, the way we eat our food, the way we greet our friends, the way we conduct business on a day-to-day basis. The earth will never be the same as it was. What's basically happening is that we are going back to a more simple way of life before airplanes.
Well, airplanes are one of the best ways of spreading the coronavirus worldwide.
That's what I'm trying to say. Because it isn't about the coronavirus and spreading it. It is now everybody has a fear of this concept of pandemic, just like they had a fear of nuclear radiation. And so it didn't really change a lot of things because the nuclear power plants are still being used on the New Madrid fault line.
Yeah, and
you want to talk about serious problems, there's one right there staring everybody in the face, and nobody is talking about it because they're a fear of a virus that may or not, they might get it. How many times have you ever had a flu? And
Oh,
did you?
just a few. Just a few.
And did you, at those times, ever have a fear of dying?
No, but
Why?
because people weren't reported to be bleeding out of all kinds of orifices as a
Yeah,
result
but
of
they're
it.
not bleeding out of orifices now either, so what's different?
Well, no, actually, I've read reports that they are.
No,
I've
they're
read
not.
reports that
That's absurd. It's like most people that are old usually die of pneumonia. They get something wrong with their body, and then their immune system cannot cope, and that's what usually takes you out, is pneumonia, not a bloody nose. Now, with that said, give me a break here. This is nuts. And everybody has a right to their opinion, just like they did with Bibles and the rest of it. And that is an okay thing. And what is going to come out of all of this is they need to change your lifestyle. And you already knew you needed to change, you just didn't do it. Now you have to. That's what this is going to do. It's going to change the way you interface like it did before airplanes.
Well, it's working beautifully.
As a metaphor.
It's working beautifully because travel's restricted. Airlines are on the verge of bankruptcy. Probably a couple more weeks, and most of the airlines will be bankrupt because they're running on cash flow.
You can't even rent a car to drive somewhere right now.
Mm-hmm.
What they're doing with Hertz Rent-A-Car and other things like that is they'll deliver the car to your address now. This is all because you can't get on an airplane to go down into California. You have to rent a car. You can't rent a car because they're afraid of the disease. They can't, da-da-da. Look, the whole thing cascades down into changes in lifestyle. And we are at a crisis, and it is time to start thinking about our water.
Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us. George in New Hampshire, welcome. You're on with Rick.
Hi, Vincent, and hello, Dr. Rick. I just wanted to say, you mentioned something earlier in the broadcast about how the 100-year-old trees, even though they had their root system, the very soil or earth that they were in actually had turned to mud. And I think the same thing, the principle applies to us. For years, they've been softening us up with one outrageous thing after another, like in your face, something that turns the world upside down. They call black white and white black, and they're constantly stirring the pot so that people are running to and fro, not wondering, running over here, running over there, running over there. But after a while, it destabilizes the person to the point where it gets them in, I think, a state of mind where when something like this comes along, they don't have the soil, the roots in that soil that will allow them to stand in the storm. And I'll just say this is a relative unknown in the sense is nobody really knows what escaped from that laboratory. But the tendency is that at least the pervading thoughts seem to think that it's military grade. But these are the times that test men's soul. And what I'm just saying, in other words, is that I have said this before, and Dr. Rick, there's a man right there in your community, the Foundation of Human Understanding at Tall Timbers Ranch. He discovered an ancient technique, and he put it up there for free, a 7-minute exercise, free, called Antidote, like antidote for poison, antidoteforall.com. And it's 7 minutes, and what it does is it makes you, just like the word stable, I looked up the meaning of the word stable, like the origins of it, and it just says constant, steadfast, virtuous. it's not a good thing, and I don't mean to be long-winded, I'll just say it's not a good thing to learn how to swim when you're drowning. But we're in a ship that is taking on water. Now, whether or not it goes down, whether it levels off, whether, the pumps start pumping the water out, one thing's for sure, if you can stay in the moment and be centered, they don't teach you this. This is a lost art. But that exercise, observation exercise, will teach you how to stay in the moment, and you won't be looking backwards, you won't be looking forwards, you'll be looking right about you right here. AntidoteForAll.com. That's all I'm going to say, gentlemen. I know you have a lot to cover. God bless you. Bye-bye.
God bless you, George, and God help us. Rick, any comments?
It's like that old parable or metaphor where the neighbor goes over to the farmer and he says, "This just happened. This is a good thing." And the farmer says, "We'll see." And then something awful happens. And the farmer says, "We'll see." It is not a thing to react to, but to keep your center. And once you do that, you are the farmer. You're not jumping for joy, and you're not jumping from fear. You're walking in balance. That was Sun Bear. I remember that's the whole thing, to walk in balance and just watch what happens, not react.
Okay, so last growing season, we had massive flooding in the Midwest and in the grain growing regions. So crops were delayed and crops were ruined. Then we had problems growing beets and potatoes because of the flooding. And now what we're doing is we're saying, migrant workers, you're going to have to stay home because we've got the borders closed for now. And farmers are trying to tell us that without the additional help of the migrant workers, the crops will not be able to be planted, the yields will not be realized, and there will be another food shortage. Rick, do you want to discuss that?
Well, sure. You can. The whole thing is an opportunity to change our lifestyle to meet the current challenges. And all of it leads you back to becoming more sovereign. So actually, in a sense, this virus is actually a good thing because now you all are going to begin thinking about producing your own food. You should have been doing that last year. You should have been doing it 10 years ago. Now you have to do it. So realize it and enjoy the change.
We've been put on notice. We've all been put on notice worldwide about we're responsible for ourselves. And that, just because there is 0 through 9 on the phone dial pad doesn't mean when you dial 9 and then 1 and then 1, someone's going to help you. That's something that's being found out right now. The police are now saying, you know what, we can't be everywhere and we're not going to be everywhere. And we're not going to risk getting ill and dying because you have a problem. So we'll take your report over the phone. That's what's happening right now. So dialing 911 does not have the results that it used to have, let's say, a few weeks ago. So now people are realizing that, really they are on their own. That's something we realized a long, long time ago, that we are on our own. As long as we've been farmers, we've been on our own. So you need to have some medical knowledge. If someone gets cut, you may go to the hospital, the emergency room, and you may find out that they can't help you because they're overloaded with people who are coughing and can't breathe and have high fevers as a result of the coronavirus. So you may find out that if you want to get some flour, if you want to get some sugar, if you want to get some wheat, if you want to get some powdered milk because you don't want to go to the store, you can find out that it's not available. So what is preparedness? Well, it's pretty simple. Preparedness is having what you need before you need it. That would be the skills, the tools, the spare parts, the ingredients, and the knowledge beforehand. That's what it is. And what we're finding, though, is what Kurt Wilson and I termed situational ethics and situational morality. So now what's happening is people are saying, yeah, but I know we agreed to do that, but things have changed, so all bets are off. That's another thing that's happening. Rick, what are your feelings about how honesty and integrity has been flushed down the toilet?
This is the difference between ethics and morals. Ethics is a moral man. I mean, an ethical man knows not to cheat on his wife. A moral man won't. When you begin to walk your talk, it can be exactly opposite my values, and you're not wrong. But you are following your own path. And that's what most people are not doing. They're not knowing what to do. They don't listen to themselves.
Okay,
Once
so
you start to do that, none of this makes much sense and is no longer a fear.
All right, let's talk about this. What would you do? What would you do if, someone came to your house to visit and you welcomed that person? And you said, you know what? I'll tell you what. For dinner, and let's say this is, over a month ago. Okay? When things were a little more normal as compared to how they're out of control now. So let's say a month ago or so. And this person came over and this person, you knew this person. You knew her for a long time. You knew him for a long time. And you said, I'll tell you what, why don't we have some hamburgers for dinner? I'll go out to the store. Hey, you want to go with me? We'll go to the store and we'll go to the supermarket and we'll get some hamburger meat and we'll get some rolls and we'll get some pickles and we'll get some potato chips and we'll put them on the grill. What do you think? And the person says, that sounds great. But I'll tell you what, I'm just going to stay here. You go and I'll help you cook when we get back. So you go, your guest stays home at your house, and you find out later on that your guest went through your house, walked around, opened doors, looked everywhere. How'd you feel about that? No answer?
Well, I don't understand. You mean, what would I do if I found somebody went through my things?
Yeah.
I would ask them to leave. And I have had people do that to me, and I've asked them to leave.
Okay. Now, what if you found out after the fact, a week later?
That's happened also. I would then not want them to come back anymore, and I would probably review my behavior in terms of allowing anyone into my home, which, by the way, is why I now no longer take people that I don't know into my home anymore.
Yeah, right. And we've done the same thing. So what I'm saying is some people have different values from others. Now, I was taught when I was very young, my mom said, children are to be seen and not heard. If adults are talking, you don't walk up and join the conversation when you're 10 years old. You stay at a distance. That's the protocol. That's the way it is. You don't have to like it, but that's the way it is. And when you leave the kitchen table, you say, may I please be excused. You don't put your elbows on the table. You don't chew your food with your mouth open. You don't spit your food out on the plate or on the floor or on the table. I mean, there's certain things you don't do. And I was taught many of those, and I don't do them. But I guess what I'm saying is not everybody was taught this. And there are violations of these protocols, which I think are reasonable. Not the violations. The protocols are reasonable. And I would never dream of taking a stroll through someone's house. And I would never dream of staying in someone's house when the owner of the house was not there. I mean, I've been offered, let's take it to an extreme. So I know a guy who said, listen, we're going to be gone, and let me give you the keys to our house. And I said, absolutely not. I do not want the keys to your house. I didn't want the keys because I didn't want there even to be a perception or a hint of a thought that I might go into that house. I would not do it. I would not do it. Now, if a person said, we're going to be gone, would you mind, driving by, while we're away for a week? I'd say, well, I'll drive by, but I'm not going in your house. I'm not going in any of your buildings. I will not do that. Because I think that that's a protocol that I would not violate. That's what I was taught. You don't snoop. You don't spy. You don't look under bathroom stalls. You don't look under girls' dresses. There's certain things you don't do. But yet, our morals have... Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. RichardAllenMiller.com. Richard, A-L-A-N Miller.com. Rick, as a result of the Corona panic, which is the name that I coined a long time ago about this, from the very beginning, I called it the Corona panic. People have been told to go home, bring their computers, and work from home. And the internet has already experienced, at least according to my measurements here at the farm, has experienced about a 25% bandwidth reduction from what we used to see. Are you seeing that as well? Have you measured yours?
No, I'm not even, I've got other things that are more important to me. And by the way, just for all of you listening, I've got 2 brand new books that will be going up on my website for sale in the next week. One is on psychedelic mushrooms, a supplement to my original book, and the other will be on stress management, because that's how you get sick, when you have too much stress and you're not coping correctly. And this book will give you guidelines and rules on how to do that. It's something I wrote back in the 80s and never completed. And both of them will be going up on my site shortly, and then the Non-Local Mind, and then the Tower book. All of those will be happening this year.
Are these books e-books, or are they physically printed? I'm going to
do the 2 as e-books. The one is in full color identification of psychedelic mushrooms. And there is not any good book out there that's doing that. And I have just formed a corporation in Alberta growing psychedelic mushrooms for the government of Canada and the University of Israel. And what we're going to do is psychedelic mushrooms identification. So you can go into your own yard and identify what is what, as those mushrooms will be popping up everywhere this spring.
What is the likelihood of finding psychedelic mushrooms in the typical...
You mean in Missouri and your cow pies? High likelihood. There are so many different psychedelic mushrooms, and the good news is it is absolutely not illegal to either grow them or to have them on your person. It is illegal to sell them and or extract the chemistries.
Okay, so eating psychedelic mushrooms raw, what's the downside?
They're toxins, and what they do is cause the body to freak out and overproduce a look-alike neurotransmitter that causes you to hallucinate. When you do that with mushrooms, you are creating a resonant cavity oscillator that dialogues with subtle bodies outside the physical body, and that is where psyche into matter and placebo goes from 10% up to 60%. And that theory is now being used at Oxford and in the Netherlands as the primary understanding of how psychedelic mushrooms help heal people. That isn't the mushroom that does it. Again, it's the body. And it's like taking a toxin that has a similar look-alike neurotransmitter. That's how it works.
So are you saying that the psychedelic mushrooms heal because people in their minds believe that they're being healed? Is that what you're saying?
As your mind's, it turns out that the current way physics is now explaining things is that the laws of physics change with altered states of consciousness. And now these various altered states become tools in a toolbox for the next stage in the evolution of man, becoming something more.
Are you saying that Newton's laws don't apply?
Gravity and no, that's right. There's no such thing as gravity. The Earth sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
So how do you explain that? So do laws of physics?
Well, you mean gravity?
Yeah, that's one.
That's
a
different thing altogether. That would take me half a day to explain. Basically, when people ask me, is the Earth flat or is it round? The correct answer is yes, because space is a construct in man's mind. It's not real. And it is an assumption based on the fact that man is extremely limited. For example, in physics, you always start with assumed truth. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. When you look over the fence, and you look at that fence and you say, well, it's brown, you have made an assumption because you cannot see the other side of the fence. That's the limitation of science.
Some people might say the shortest distance to profanity is closing your thumb in a car door.
I love it. It's time we start having fun with this thing.
It's tough. It's tough in this environment.
Metaphysical University for Children, because it's time our children that are smarter than our adults take over this political crap that's going on.